because these are very nice sessions to share. So good morning, everybody. I'm Hildy Weissert, president of the Sandisfield Art Center. Delighted to introduce master photographer Thad Kubis, who presented 3 wonderful workshops last year. They're on our website. You can look at the recordings. And is here today to talk about and show impressionistic photography. And the great thing is how hands-on it is with people. As long as you remember not to attend the Zoom meeting with the same device you're trying to take pictures with, I think that's always a limitation. I want to mention a couple of things. Also, Barbara Penn, Vice President of the Art Center, is here. Chair of the program committee that's been putting together, and Barbara brought us that last year, the connection, which has been so great. Coming up at the Art Center, and I put the website, sandisfieldartcenter.org, in the chat, on July 3rd, we've got a big 20 local sculptors with an outdoor sculpture exhibit at the home and meadow of Leanna Toscanini. And on July 10th, there's a person who we believe is a crossword puzzle maven, who has done live, in person, and Zoom crossword puzzle sessions for us, and she's going to do one again this year, and actually show you how to improve your timing on the Berkshire Eagle puzzle. Michelle Arnaud. Michelle, if you want to just wave here so people see that you're actually here for photography. And I see Suzanne O'Connell, our board member, and those might be actual trees. But in any case, and then at the end of July, a big outdoor concert on Peter Biamonte's field in Sandisfield of Roger Street Friedman. And we always have shows in the gallery. That's the exception to our being sort of closed. There's a wonderful show there now. And we will be opening up the Fates Willing in September, coming back with some great live programs. So, Thad, I'm going to turn it over to you. And
okay, can you all hear me? Because I just lost sound.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, good, great. Well, good morning. So first of all, thanks to the Sandisfield Art Center for allowing me to present this concept of impressionistic photography. And I'm going to give you, before we start, for those that are going to be using smartphones, you may want to consider to load or download any of these apps that are in red. So my favorite is Halide, H-A-L-I-D-E. That offers the best scope of how to use an app to create impressionistic photography. Pro Camera works fairly well. 645 Pro, a little bit more complex. Set by Camera sort of works and sort of doesn't work, but it's going to be difficult with a traditional cell phone to drop things out of focus unless you really are diligent in the way you are playing with the screen. But the advantage of all these 4 sites is that they allow you to control every aspect of the smartphone as if it was a traditional DSLR. If you have a DSLR, you should have no problem whatsoever. Okay. Regarding questions, I think Heidi is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you got questions, either just ask me those at the time or send her a chat and we'll get to those. All right. Okay. So that is an impressionistic photograph, right? And there is a discussion going on. It's been going on for a long time that expressionistic anything is part of the modernist movement. Came out of early 20th century Germany. The idea was to take a subject and allow the artist to express their own view, their own interpretation, their own feelings, their own emotions of that subject. So you've seen the Picasso's version, you've seen Matisse's, you've seen all the different painters interpret. Well, photography started to do that. The whole concept of impressionistic painting came around, related to photography, came around 1905, and that was the early days of photography. It is best known in America by a photographer named Aaron Siskin. Aaron Siskin died in 1991. He was primarily known for his ability to apply movement and to change the way a photograph looked. And the shot that you see there is basically only using movement. And though you'll see by the end of the session, movement is only one of about a dozen different tools or technique that you could use to create expressionistic photography. So again, the image I put up there was created solely with movement. Okay, so this is the official dictionary. I once had a professor in college who said if you start off a term paper with a dictionary definition, he's going to give you an F. But we got to start someplace, right? So this is what is considered to be the official definition. It's a style of photography that utilizes long exposures. That's a good thing. Dreamy looks, but it only contains, in this case, one element of what it can be. Long exposures is only one part of what you could use to create impressionistic photography. You also, it doesn't talk, at the time this was put together, there were digital cameras, primarily black and white was the big driver. Today you could use black and white, color, digital cameras, film cameras, and a variety of other cameras. So there are a bunch of impressionistic options, right? So you'll see on the slide, there's movement and panning, which I'm going to explain each one of these. And if we want to try them, we could run through a hands-on concept. Zooming is another very, very cool, very simple, sort of tough to do on a smartphone, but if you practice enough, you can really create that. Focus is the simplest of all, and with smartphones, since they are technically always in focus, it becomes an issue. But most of the apps that I recommended at the beginning of the presentation allow you to change the focus and allow you to drop things out of focus. And I'll also talk to you about how to use alternative elements to focus without ever really trying to focus your camera. In camera, you're going to see that the one advantage of smartphones over most DSLRs and clearly over film is that you have a tremendous capability of changing the photograph in your camera, either before you take the picture or after you take the picture without ever going to a computer. I beta tested a camera called the L16 about 3 years ago. They discontinued the camera, but I could literally do mini Photoshop work on the back screen of that camera, which really made it a very, very unique tool for impressionistic photography. And lastly, there's what you could do in post-production. And I don't know how familiar you are with programs like Lightroom or programs like Photoshop. There are other ones as well, but those are the two main industry standards. If you're using a smartphone and you want to do post-production in the camera or on your tablet or afterwards, Apple has this thing called Photos, which is a really great editing tool. Very basic. There are other, Snapseed. I think Flickr has their own. There's a variety out there. This picture that you're looking at here is a combination of long exposure and movement. So this was done with a black and white film camera, and picture was taken literally, not with this camera, this is a digital camera. Take a picture, slow the shutter speed down, and drag the camera while I had the shutter speed down or while I had the shutter speed open. And you can see it has an interesting concept to it. It's actually the front of a car, and you can see the headlines or the headlights of the car here and here, repeated here and here, and the grill gets repeated here and here. One of the very cool things about impressionistic photography is the highlights are the ones that become overly dominant in many cases. So if there's something bright in your photograph and you move something around, it is going to stay proportionally brighter even if you overexpose it or you what they call step on it, right? So you can see that the highlights of those little lines moving around, they're coming through because they were the brightest parts of the photograph. Okay, so the first one I want to go into is zooming. Zooming is something that is fairly easy to do on a digital camera. And essentially what you would do is you take your digital camera. So those of you who have a digital camera, if you want to break it out, and what you want to do is you want to set your exposure mode onto probably TV, or in some cameras it's S, and that's shutter speed, right? And what that does is shutter speed is the component that allows you to take a quick picture or to slow the shutter speed down slower. So you're basically getting a longer exposure. And the example that I use is if I was walking in front of your camera and you took a photograph of me at 1,000th of a second, you're only going to see me for literally 1,000th of a second. So I'm going to be frozen in whatever that locking position may be. But if you are using a slower shutter speed, let's say a 60th of a second, you're not only going to capture me for a longer period of time, but part of me will be in focus and part of me will be out of focus. So, and when you're in that mode, if you take your lens and you literally zoom in and out like this, like you'll see that, if you if you time it right, you're going to get a very, very unique effect that could turn anything into a different type of photograph. And I've got a couple of samples. So I was walking around Sheffield and I said, okay, look, this is a shot of a train that's parked behind the town hall. There is no zooming involved, right? You can see it's a straight shot. It's sort of clear, it's sharp, you see the whole thing. But then what I did is I literally zoomed in. So I was in the same position, dropped my shutter speed down at a 30th of a second, maybe, I think it was a third, maybe 15th of a second. I held my camera, I put it on a tripod, and what I did is as I pressed the shutter speed, the shutter down, I literally spun the zoom on my camera to zoom in and to zoom out. And you can combine them. This is a zoom out, right? So you see that it's larger than the original image, but it provides you with a very creative way to take a simple photograph and make it a little bit interesting. It also does something from the point of composition. Your eye is drawn in to the photograph because what we have is all these leading lines. You'll see in the next image what I mean by that. So this is a shot of a flower planter at the fire department in Sheffield. I went over, I literally stood over the planter and I zoomed in and I zoomed out. Now, this all takes experimentation. Number one, it takes a little bit of time of understanding how fast you want to zoom in, you want to zoom out. Your shutter speed, excuse me, your shutter speed is an important aspect of it. But once you get that down, you could really do it extremely well. For those people who are using smartphone, there's an app called Slow Shutter. And what Slow Shutter does, you download the app and it extends the time the shutter on the smartphone is open. You can create some very, very unique images. The first image that I showed you was created with that app called Slow Shutter. I set the shutter speed on about a 15th of a second. I was looking at that's clothing. I was looking at clothing and I just moved the camera like that over the course of a 15th of a second. But again, it takes a little bit of practice. This is not something that very few people get it the first time out. They'll say, let me try it again. And the longer the shutter speed, the more exposure and the more movement you're going to capture. So it's a game you got to play, make some notes, understanding what you're trying to do. But you could do it with nearly any subject. So for example, this is Route 7 in Sheffield. I'm sitting on a bench the other day. It was very, very warm. And I'm waiting for cars to come by. And I'm zooming in and I'm zooming out. Now, what's unique about this is if there was someone walking across the road or walking on the sidewalk, they'd probably disappear and you wouldn't see them because they're not going to be there long enough for the exposure. But you can see what's happening. You can see there is some sort of truck. It looks like a pickup truck moving from left to right. And you can see your eye is being drawn into this area that is behind behind the building across Route 7. Also, what happens is when you zoom in or you zoom out, it either compresses the image or extends the image. So you've got a real simple tool to do that. Anyone have any other questions? Anyone want to try that? Mike, you got a DSLR. You've tried that before?
Yeah, I've done a couple. I put it on a tripod,
Okay.
slow shutter speed,
Mhm.
and let a passing car drive by or a truck, and then the buildings are in focus. So
Yeah.
you're just getting like a train going by. You can do that.
That's
Also,
part of the panning concept.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I find that zooming in and out, do one or the other, not both.
To do both, you tend to need a longer exposure,
Yeah.
right? Because you want that. But I've done some nice sunsets where I've zoomed in and zoomed out, and the sunsets become much more attractive in a creative sense. But you can do them both. And like I said, with the slow shutter app, you could literally do this with your smartphones.
How long can you do a slow shutter on that app?
You know what? For quite some time, I think it's into the seconds. Yeah, I think it's into the seconds. Yeah.
When I traveled, when I wanted to do the Northern Lights, which I didn't do correctly, you want to have a real long shutter speed. The
Let's see.
aperture like at f/22 or something, so that you get the whole Northern Lights coming across.
It says here on, I'm looking at the app, it goes, well, it's 10 seconds. You've got ways of extending that. It has a variety of different options. Like I said, with the apps, it takes a little bit of time to understand, but this is at least a 10-second.
You could also do star movement then.
You could do star movement. Yes, you can. Star movement usually
up into a nice bright star. So if it's clear out.
Yeah, normally you need 20 seconds to get that star circled, but you can. But there are other apps available that allow you to extend your exposure for hours. I mean, it really depends on what your game plan is. One of the things you got to be advised that the longer you expose, the image will maybe become overexposed, so you may have to use some sort of filters to darken it. But slow shutter, I'm looking at it right here. It says here, I could go up. Oh no, slow shutter. I can go up to 60 seconds on a set. And if I want, I have a setting called bulb. Bulb will allow the shutter to be open until I press it, until I release my finger. So as long as I press it and I press it again, so I could have multiple, I don't know if you can see that or not. I just created a shot. So you have the ability to go up to 60 seconds with an automatic timer, or bulb, which is on most DSLRs. Bulb is when you press the shutter and then you can move it around and press the shutter again. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but I got a nice creative shot, right? So slow shutter app works fairly well.
Yeah, I'm looking
what I'll
at
do
my
is, yeah,
camera now. I can go 4 or 5 minutes, and I have an old camera.
Well, do you have a setting that says either bulb or T for timer?
Yeah, I'm on the timer now. Yeah.
Okay, so timer
all
will
the way down.
So timer will allow you to keep your shutter open as long as your finger's depressed. Yeah,
it's 30 seconds.
That's preset, right?
Yeah, preset for 30 seconds.
So there's probably a setting on your camera that allows you to, as long as you hold the shutter button down, you can keep it going for whatever you want.
All right, so if you have an iPhone and you mount it on a tripod, what's the gadget that you have so that you can shut the shutter without touching the camera?
So there's a couple tools you can use. Technically, it's called an intervoltometer, which an intervoltometer is a timing device that allows you to remote control the shutter of anything, right? Okay. One of the ways you could do it, depending on which phone you have, if you have a set of earbuds that have the wires to them, the volume control is a shutter.
Oh.
So again, it's not with all the newest ones because they started eliminating the cables.
Yeah,
but if you have an old set, plug it in. Usually it's the plus or the minus. It doesn't really matter. That's the shutter. So you can literally click it and hold it without ever touching the camera. But there are apps that you can get that are more expansive than slow shutter that allow you to preset it for 20 minutes. I've done it for as much as a couple of hours. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? I'll move on.
Thad, this is slow shutter. Cam is the name that I see.
There's a couple. There's one called slow shutter cam. That's the one I would recommend.
Yeah, okay.
There's another one called fast shutter cam, but that does the opposite. But yeah, slow shutter cam is the one that I use. Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah. And it can be used for more, it can be used for more practical points as well. So for example, if you download the app, they use the example of a fire. You could photograph a fireplace on slow shutter, and the fire, instead of being defined, looks like it's dancing. And you got to remember what happens. The longer you keep the shutter open, the more movement you're capturing over the same plane, the less defined it becomes. You'll see a photograph at the end of a waterfall that was used with that technique. Okay?
Yep.
Okay. So you've got this other one where you can start doing combinations. So movement is literally moving the camera any way you want. Panning is when you are following a subject and you click the shutter anywhere on that subject. And what ends up happening is the subject freezes in focus, is what Mike was talking about, and then everything around it becomes blurry. And you can use it again. It takes experimentation, because what ends up happening is if you're watching a car, the speed of the car determines the shutter speed on how fast or how slow it's going to, or how much blur there's going to be. But if you do it the right way, here's panning. So you'll notice the building in the back is fairly sharp, right? But the car itself, or in this case here, a pickup truck dragging a mower, is blurry. Because what I did is I took the shot and I just dragged a little bit, and the exposure was very, very quick. And then you could use it even to more unique, something like this. This is actually lights at night. And what I literally did is I took my camera, set the shutter on a slow shutter speed, and I moved my camera forward. So moving it allows in this case, the sensors to become exposed over a long period of time. And you could also, with DSLRs, you could do this with, you have multiple exposure capability in your camera. You could do this with multiple exposure. But you see what ends up happening is you're taking a traditional image, in this case lights, and you're making it into something that has a little bit more creativity to it. And that's all because you're not only taking movement, but you're tracking items as well. We got another example of that. So here again, you can see over here, this is where the image started. And then I dragged it down, and you can see this is the secondary part of this. You can actually see the movement. And that's what's very nice about using movement and panning. Again, it takes a little bit of time with exposure, but you actually get to see the movement. You get to see the force that's driven behind it. And it becomes a very, very unique tool. And as I tell people this, it could take rotting garbage and make it look beautiful, because you've now redefined the subject. You've eliminated what it is, and you made it into something else. And that goes back to the early definition about movement and using it as a photographic movement tool. So then you've got this other one, this next one here. So you notice here, this is again panning. So what I did is I had a camera lined up on the pickup truck, a lot of pickup trucks on Route 7 that day, and I'm moving the camera. And as the pickup truck gets into my view frame, I am clicking the shutter. This is about a 16th of a second. So I'm catching the blur in the background, but because I'm moving at the same speed of the car will, or the item, the horse, whatever it could be, will be sharper. And again, it takes a little bit of time to understand that the faster an item is moving, the faster your shutter speed needs to be. But when you're moving an item quickly like this, almost certainly everything in the background is going to have some sort of movement to it, some sort of strip to it, while the item that you're tracking is going to be very, very clear and very in focus. And I've done shots, actually did this a class like this a couple of years ago at Hancock Shaker Village. We did shots on Route 20 that froze the people in the car, that they were as sharp as if it was not a moved shot. And all it takes is practice and adjusting the shutter speed. Any questions on movement and panning?
When you have, with your iPhone, if you hold the shutter, you get multiple images. You can pick out the best one.
So again, with the iPhone, unless you're using an app that allows you to adjust the shutter, you really can't adequately do this. You can do in the live mode, right? If you ever use live mode is a 3-second video. If you take your smartphone and you, in the upper right-hand side, there's going to be this bullseye with a slash through it. If you tap it, it becomes white or yellow depending on the version of phone you have. That's taking a 3-second video, and it's not the greatest thing in the world because it takes a little bit of time to practice like that. And with the new phones, if you hold down the shutter speed too long, it converts into a video. But it does actually provide you with that capability. The other advantage is if you take a live shot, let me just get back to my camera. So I'm going to take a live shot of my camera there. And if I'm in the edit mode, right, I'm in the gallery mode and I drag up from the bottom. My finger did that too quickly. If I drag up from the bottom, come on, buddy. What's going on here? If I drag up from the bottom, what's going to happen is, there you go. What's going to happen is you're going to get 3 different creative options beneath that. So I could take, and I could show this later on the actual computer. Well, what it does, it allows me to take the shot and see it as is. The second one will loop it, causing some sort of blur. The third one will bounce it, causing another type of blur. But the last one is a long exposure. So whatever you photograph is now going to be blurred together as if you were planning and using movement. So if you have any smartphone, doesn't matter if it's an iPhone or not, there is a live mode. And in the live mode, you have this ability to drag up and select 4 different effects from that one image. That all makes sense?
Ted, would the Android phone be similar to what you're saying for?
Yeah, Android calls it live or motion, and they have the same type of function. I think with Androids, with the Apple phones, all you need to do is select the image. In the Android phone, you have to go into the edit function. But with an Apple phone, all you do is you select the image and slowly drag it up, and you can probably see this on the bottom. You see these 3, and if I move it over, you see these 4 different versions. If I select the version, what ends up happening is, and again, I will try to show this later, there is some motion that comes in there. So it's a very, very cool way of doing it. And the more radical you're moving the camera, the more radical that effect will be. That good for everybody? Sounds good?
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So now you got the one that is probably common that everybody tends to use. It's focus. Now, there is an issue with iPhones, and this is why I recommend different camera apps. It is almost impossible to get a picture out of focus with an iPhone unless you've practiced this very strange technique about holding your finger on the screen and dragging things around. It takes a lot of practice. But slow shutter speed or the not slow shutter speed, any of those camera apps allows you to change that. If you, for example, use the app HALIDE, it has on the bottom a capability of where I could literally change the amount of focus in the picture. So I could go from totally making something out of focus to totally making something ultra sharp. So when you're creating focus, if you're not using a DSLR, you'll need an app. And again, all of the apps that I recommend have different capabilities of focusing. With a DSLR, the only thing you need to do is make sure your camera is not in autofocus, it's in manual focus, and you aim at something and then just slightly to turn the focus wheel until it gets to the degree of out of focus that you want. And what ends up happening is you get these incredible, beautiful, blurry type of images that many people have told me they're almost spiritual. And I'll show you an example. So this is Chesapeake Bay last April, actually. Early morning shooting a dawn image, sort of okay shot, but I was really bored with it. So what I did is I did the same exact shot with my camera out of focus, and there it is. So I've taken what was a defined landscape, a bridge, some water, and I've turned it into whatever you want it to be. I mean, it could be a wonderful dream, it could be a bad dream. It's really up to you. But focusing is really the simplest tool that you could use. And again, with the smartphones, you need an app. You can, for example, if you have tissue paper, thin or parchment paper, you can put a piece of parchment over your lens. Don't glue it on, hold it like this with your finger, and that will drop everything out of focus as well. And if you practice, you'll eventually get to the point where you could literally use your thumb or your finger will allow you to drop things out of focus on the phone. But my suggestion is use any one of those camera apps I mentioned and use the focusing capability. Halide provides the easiest tool to do that with. And then you have other things. You can get lenses for your DSLR and lenses for your smartphone that are preset to be out of focus. So you say, well, why would I want a lens that's preset? Well, it gives you, you'll see here in the next shot, it gives you the ability to create different out of focus effects. So instead of being something where it is totally diffused and you can't tell what it is, you have the ability to soft focus. It's preset soft focus, so you can still see what it is, but you're really not seeing it in that sharp, defined shape. There are other lenses that you could purchase as well that change the out of focus bokeh, the blurriness of the image. It could go from circles to squares to diamonds. It could go to a variety of different things, and that's an example of that. So there's a variety of tools that you can use. There also are loads of filters for DSLR and for smartphones that you could purchase that give you this effect, that allow you to make a very creative image out of a standard image. And again, this is another one. This was a successful event of my smartphone. And what I did is I was in my smartphone camera. I have an iPhone 12 Max, and I placed my finger over the lenses, and by moving my finger around, I could get all different creative images. It doesn't only work on fingers. If I put it on clothing or I put it on objects, that same type of, so here's my shirt, right? There's my fingers on my palm. There's my fingers allowing light. All you have to do is just move your hand around this. And it works there. It works with hair. It works with clothing. It works with, it's a great tool to use out in the garden or on a lawn when you're doing sort of very, very textured areas. Put your camera, your iPhone camera as close as it possibly can, and you'll get that image. You have to remember something. iPhones have a capability of literally going down to about 1 inch to 3 inches of being in focus. So you would have to get really, really close, like that's my computer keyboard, right? Or if I wanted to, I could bring this up right to my screen, and my screen has dropped out of focus. So it takes a little bit of practice and time, but by using these tools, either your hand, using an app that allows you to soft focus, using a soft focus lens, or using the close-up concept, you can create it. I don't recommend this. People have done this. It's really it's a nasty thing to clean up. People have in gel and Vaseline and rub them on their camera lenses. I don't recommend it because it's going to damage the lens. But you can buy a filter and do that to the filter. So I do that with a DSLR a lot. I have a series of clear filters that each of them have a different type of gel on them. So one's a hair gel, one's cream, one's a blue dye. And what it does is it changes the level of out of focusness based on the kind of gel I'm using. But I never put them directly on my lens. That sound good?
You could always use an old filter.
Yeah.
Well, the skylight filter that might have been scratched, you just rub Vaseline on it, and then you're not worrying about your primary. Actually, you should always have a filter on it anyway.
Yeah. So something else you could do again. Sorry.
So there's a question from Suzanne.
Okay.
So would you explain the live mode again? And Suzanne, you can unmute yourself.
So the live mode, depending on what version camera you have, if you have an iPhone, live mode is a bullseye type icon that on older phones is in the middle of the screen above the picture, and on newer phones it's to the right of the screen above the photograph or above the viewfinder. When it is white and it has a slash through it, the live phone is off. When you click it and it either turns yellow, blue, or there's no slash, what you're creating is a 3-second mini video. So for example, if I was going to create a live shot of me and my hand, I'll get this right, and my hand is moving, I'm creating a couple different shots. What's happening is it looks like it's a standard shot, but if I hold my finger on the screen for about 3 seconds, I get a mini video. So you should be able to see that. Can you all see that? No?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what a live photo is. When you're in the gallery and you slowly drag up, you have the ability to change that to a different type. Yeah, you can see, there we go. You can see how we got the moving area has become blurred. And again, with some practice, you can create some pretty interesting images. I don't recommend you leave the live mode on because it is a little video. It creates a lot of different images. It does burn space and it does burn battery. But Susan, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You got it. Okay. So,
And I just sent you a picture of my placemat.
where'd you send it to my email address?
Yeah,
Let's take a look at it.
I never would have thought of doing that. It's really cool, I thought.
You know, you hang around with me, Dwight, you're gonna have a whole nother revolution in photography. Let's see. Let me see. It hasn't come in yet. So up here it is. Let's see. Oh, that's phenomenal. Oh, that's great. All right, can you all see that? Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So
That's
one thing I was
phenomenal.
mentioning in the chat is whether people can see depends on how their view is set up and how much, what their device they're using. So
What I'll do is Hildy, I'll send a couple of samples to you, and you email them to people if
That's
they
great.
want them, right? Yeah, but
great.
yeah, I've had a problem when I hook up more than one camera to my my Zoom. I tend to getting a lot of echoing, so I stopped doing that. But that's a great shot. That's a great shot. So that's literally laying your camera on a placemat.
Yeah, it's just, it's like it's a woven bamboo-y kind of thing.
That's great. That is the perfect example of how to do that. And again, with a DSLR, you can do the same thing by just dropping it out of focus, making sure that you're in manual focus, not autofocus. So with DSLRs, your lens may have an autofocus, manual focus switch, or the camera itself may have an icon that shuts the focusing off. You have to play with which one it is. Okay. Any more questions on focus? Okay.
I don't have a question on focus, Thad. This is Barbara. I just was wondering, is there any major advantage to using your camera versus the smartphone if you have two? I mean, if I have a smartphone and I have a digital camera, so what would be the major advantage to me to use the camera?
So unless you have, well, there actually is no advantage or disadvantage in most cases. So my
Okay.
iPhone, which is an iPhone 12, now it has this thing called the RAW format. I could create images that are reproducible as large as 16 by 20. That's something that you really never had before, right? So that's a great tool.
Yes.
The negative is that unless you put a separate lens on the camera on the smartphone, you don't have the ability to use great telephoto shots. So if anyone has ever taken a telephoto shot out of a window, let's say at something on their lawn, and they're maxed out on their phone, the image is not that great. So for that, you need a DSLR. But what I've been doing, I delivered a sailboat down in May from Philly to Rockport, Maryland, and I used my smartphone I had to document it for the owner. I used my smartphone for everything because I was in a fairly narrow area. It was a 42-foot boat. So the worst I'm shooting is maybe 50 feet or out in the horizon, I didn't need to carry cameras around. It really depends on what you're doing. Based on what's happening in the camera market, people are more and more using smartphones for everything.
Wow. Thank you, Thad.
And also you have the ability to in-camera edit. I could, and I remember doing this last year for you guys. We did a smartphone course, and Dwight, I did this for your class, right? You
Right,
go in,
yeah.
you could take the photograph, you could edit in your camera, and you're done. And this is a perfect. We're gonna go into in-camera segue in a moment. So, any questions more? Any other questions about focus? Okay. Dwight, you get an A for focus. Okay, so now this is something that's relatively new. Certain DSLRs have this, most do not. Nearly all smartphones have this. So you're out in the field and you want to take a photograph, and it's just seen, it's green, whatever it may be. In an iPhone, you have a thing called filters, and I think the same thing is in non-iPhones. Basically, what that allows you to do, it allows you to dramatically change the color or the texture of a photograph. So for example, you see on the screen here, I've got this shot of a tree, right? It's just plain shot of a tree. And actually this is Sheffield green. But by using a different filter, I can now change that into a variety of ways. So those of you who have smartphones, if you go to your camera mode, you get into your camera, you're going to see there are three, let's see, there should be three gray circles someplace in your on your menu, or three circles overlapping each other. If you highlight that, you're going to get a series of filters, and it's going to be original, and it's going to say vivid, vivid warm, vivid cool, dramatic, dramatic warm, dramatic cool, and also allows you to change it into black and white. As these phones start to evolve, they're creating more and more of these filters. There are now filters available for some non-iPhones that do distortion, that do blurriness, that do texturing. So you could create an image literally just by modifying the way it looks. And one of the ways of doing that is when fall comes around, you got these incredible, gorgeous colors around. Take your smartphone, put it on vivid, warm, and get as close as you can to leaves. And not only is it going to be out of focus, but the actual color is going to be 5 or 6 times as intense as it would have been without the filters. So filters provide you a lot of cool ways of changing a traditional image, making it into something that again is totally creative. Anybody have any questions about filters on smartphones?
No.
Okay. Now, the only camera that I know that has filters like this now is the Sony. One of the newest Sony has your ability to do that. But it doesn't end there. You could, again, we're talking about things where these are all starting points. This is sort of the start of the journey. So for example, in camera, if I take a photograph and I go to and I hit my edit button, I'm going to get a series of controls that I could literally edit my image within the concept of the camera. So now here's that same picture of the tree, but now I've dropped out all the green by playing with the editing controls on my smartphone. And again, it's not available for most DSLRs, but there are a few DSLRs that allow you to do in-camera editing. Like I said, this camera I was testing, the L16 did it, and there are a couple of others that allow you to do that. So even though you could take a traditional shot, the example here, as you see, I've changed that shot around. It still looks like it's probably a tree, but it's really not visibly a tree any longer. And depending on how you combine the different curves on your smartphone, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to do a little demo of that at the end, and I'll get my program open. What you could do is you could posterize or polarize pictures to the point where you can't recognize what they are. And that can be done both in camera and off camera with apps like Apple Photo. I think it's Gallery that Microsoft or editing Microsoft, Microsoft calls it Studio. But you could literally go out and change literally any shot you want in within the camera. Now, if you're shooting with a DSLR and you want to upload it to your editing program, you can do the same with a DSLR. The problem is there right now are only a few DSLRs that give you this concept, this capability of editing, okay? Any questions on in-camera editing, in-camera effects?
Get that? I sent you a email with a slow motion fire.
We're having fun today. That's what we want to do. Okay, let's see if he comes in here. Downloading stuff. Yeah, I've got to resolve this issue with why I get this really bad echo. Oh, that's beautiful. Is that a melted car in front of it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure if you're
that-
gonna, huh?
That was a picture of little toy cars that are only about 2 inches.
Okay.
And I had it out of my backyard with sterno and number 0 steel wool burning
Nice.
on a black
Now,
cardboard.
again, you may not be able to see this on the screen depending on how you're looking at it, but the flame that's here, and I'll enlarge these at the end to show you on the screen. The flame is no longer a defined flame. It almost looks like someone has taken a paintbrush and has just dragged the color on a black background. That's a nice shot as well. Okay. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll, sorry.
Just one thing. So if anybody else wants to send you something that they take right now, as we're talking, maybe
So can you put, let me say, wait, you know what I'll do is I will put my email address in the chat. All right.
Yeah, I don't want to deprivilege people that don't have your email if they'd like to send you something.
Okay, let's see here. Let's see. I'm a terrible typist, so you have to give me a moment here. So it should be that at TVK Photos. This is going to go to everyone. Yeah, so you have my email address. If you do something during the event or before it ends, I will gladly look at it and I will gladly share it. I'll share it. I'll share these images at the end. I'll just make my screen, I'll move my screen live around. So then you've got this technique. So now you got in-camera stuff. And again, the in-camera changes are going to become more and more valid, more and more active because people are demanding it. Also, camera manufacturers really need to counter the effect of smartphones. To give you an example, Nikon, I think the year before last, lost $270 million. Olympus in their camera division. Olympus has shut down the majority, if not all, of their camera division. Canon, which once had probably 15 or 18 different camera models in what they call the consumer range, they now have 4 or 5. So smartphones have really impacted it, and the only way that we can, well, they can compete with that is by competing directly with what a smartphone offers. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to post-production. And if you got any questions about get camera, let me know. So, I carry a camera with me wherever I go, at least one camera, mostly 2. So this is your traditional shot, a beach scene. This was done in Assateague, Maryland last week. And I shot it specifically for this. So I wanted to show you what you could do with post-production. Now, defining post-production means you are, and I'm going to show you this at the end, you are downloading images from a digital camera or a smartphone into a post-production program. I use 2 post-production programs. I use Lightroom by Adobe to do they call it developing, to do my basic exposure, cropping, and other slight changes. And then they have Photoshop also by Adobe that allows me, if I want to create, combine, and use a lot of different functions and features. So for me, Lightroom is the introductory, Photoshop is the secondary level. They are available both for Apple and for non-Apple computers. They are available for mobile. I have them on my phone. I have them on my iPad. Doesn't really matter. They sort of work well. You do a lot of really unique things with them. they provide you with a broad gamut of changes where the impressionistic photography using the Apple app is going to be 60% of where you can go. Using these is going to be well over 100% where you can go. So for example, there's the shot. That is just now, I've taken a daylight shot and I've dropped it into what sort of could be like a pandemic shot, a nighttime shot. Matter of fact, if you've ever watched a lot of the old movies in black and white, most of the night shots were done during the day. They used a deep filter, 96A, I think it was, that made them look like they're dark at night. But this is just a simple going in, taking a picture, and altering the color. So you have a tremendous capability. Again, I'm going to show you some of these at the end. Then you have this really cool concept, which is combinations. So this is the shot that Hildy used to bring you guys into this presentation. So this is a slow shutter speed in Grand Central. It's also overexposed. And what overexposed means is I'm allowing more light in. And what it does is the lighter areas disappear when they're overexposed, and the darker areas tend to be made darker. With a slow shutter, you can see I can't identify any of those people. So legally, if I wanted to use this photograph, I'm sort of covered, but the image has a very, very creative feel to it. If you're using any of the camera apps on the smartphone, you go in, set your slow shutter or the slow shutter app, and then put your finger on the screen and drag it up, and you're going to see the exposure getting lighter and lighter. When it's at the area you want, you press the shutter and you've got a shot. So it's a fairly excuse me, it's a fairly easy function. With a DSLR, one of the ways to do that is you could bracket your exposures, or you could set your exposure value at 1 or 2 plus, so usually to the right, and then do a slow shutter speed, and you're going to get a similar effect. So these tools can be used inside, outside, wherever you really want it to be. And continue along with the combinations. So this is your typical beach scene, right? But what I did is I basically extended the exposure a little bit, and then I sort of darkened it so it no longer looks like a very welcoming beach. So your determination, and I've also cropped it, I shot it low. Angles are a really important aspect of it. But you could take a very, very simple shot and just modify it slightly and make it into something that's more of a fine art shot than a beach. That'd be a beach in Maryland 2 years ago. I mentioned before that you have this ability to do combinations and to create really unique feelings. So this is Kent Falls in Kent Falls, Connecticut. And this is a shot where I extended the shutter to be about a 30th of a second. So think about this. If I have a drop of water that's dropping at a 1,000th of a second at a time, to catch that frozen, I have to be faster than the drop of water. But if I want to drag that down, I have to be slower. And you could test this at home. Go someplace, kitchen, bathroom, it really doesn't matter. Turn your water faucet on, and either using your smartphone or using your DSLR, get your shutter down to about a 15th of a second, maybe an 1/8 of a second. Click the shutter, and instead of seeing a defined stream of water, you're more than likely going to see what looks like a ribbon, a slightly blurry ribbon, just like the water is over here. And it's a very, very simple, very easy effect to use, whether you are using a smartphone or a DSLR. And the opposite is true. If you don't want the water to be blurred and you want it to be sharp, take a bowl, fill it up with water, put your camera on a tripod, check your shutter speed to bracketing, and I'll tell you why it'll burst, and set your shutter speed up to maybe a 1,000th of a second, and drop a coin in and pressing the button at the same time, and you would literally get the defined drop of the water maneuvering forward and out. And you could do that with an iPhone. So depending on what iPhone you have, iPhone has the ability to do a burst. So if you are using an older iPhone, I think it's 11 and below, if you hold your finger on the shutter button, it's going to take a series of images. On the newer iPhones, you have to hold the shutter lightly and drag it to the left. And what it does is it allows you to, it's now just taking endless amounts of burst shots. So if you take endless amounts of burst shots, you're going to be able to go into some of those and see what the impact would be. So for example, if you're shooting again water and you want to freeze it on a smartphone, you have to use one of the camera apps, set your shutter speed to at least 1,000th of a second, and it will capture drops of water as they're falling or as they're rebounding out of the puddle. If you do that with a slow shutter speed, you're going to get a ribbon and this really gorgeous blur like you have over here. Again, really easy to do. They all take a little bit of practice. More combinations. So this is the Housatonic, this is the river walk where I basically massively underexposed. So I got this beautiful reflection, but everything around it is dark. So I set a mood. So you could create something like this by just playing with exposure. With a smartphone, it's really, really basic. I could take my camera app, I could hold it on, you're going to see this. And if I hold my finger on the screen for 3 seconds, I'm going to get a little box. As I drag my finger up, that is going to make the picture brighter. And as I drag my finger down, it's going to make the picture darker. So I could easily achieve this with a smartphone. I could do the same with a camera by setting the EV at either +1, 2, or 3, or -1, 2, and 3. And you can get the same type of effect. Anybody want to take a guess what that is? You get an A for the class if you guess what that is. Come on. Okay. That is a Polaroid picture gone bad. I took a Polaroid shot, and when I ran it through the Polaroid, it came out like that. Interestingly enough, there were 3 like that, and I sold them last at a show. I sold them as a triplex, it's called. But that's an error with Polaroid. So if you have a Polaroid camera, you can do that by when you are pulling the film out of the camera, speeding it up or slowing it down will
Yeah.
cause something like that. Somebody say something? No? Okay. All right. Another combination. So what do you think that is?
Looks like
That
smoke.
is a wave. Sorry?
It looks like smoke, but it could be something else.
That's a wave off a ferry boat going between Jamestown and Block Island. And it's a combination of 2 effects. It's a slightly slower shutter speed. So you can see there's a little bit of movement. That's why it looks like smoke, that what had Mike had said. And you can see how dark the water became because I overexposed it at the same time. So with a DSLR, you can slightly soft focus it, set the EV on +1. You're going to drop out the a -1 rather, and you're going to drop out the background, and you're going to get this sort of defined. It's going to be more look like it's on an iPhone. Go to one of your camera apps, set it on slow shutter, maybe a 30th of a second. Put your finger on the picture, drag it down a little bit, and you'll get a similar effect. More combinations. You don't always have to distort something, but just get close to it. This is a front view of a car that was in the Classic Car Show in Barrington last week. They had a car show in Great Barrington, and my son and I went there. All I did was get really close to the with the car, and I used the geometry to make it an abstract. And you could do this literally anytime you were around by either looking at it, zooming in, zooming out, whatever you decide on doing, but you can create abstracts like this. What do you think this is? Come on, take a guess. Someone's got to take a guess.
Looks like an oil slick.
There you go, Mike. You win. It's an oil slick. So I was coming out of the post office at the Sheffield Library. I was coming out of the post office. I walk into my car. My pickup truck backs out. Sun's up in the sky, shines on this. Take out my camera, click. I created a piece of impressionistic photography, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot. It's a lot of it is everywhere. If you look at water puddles, it's all over there. Okay. So again, it doesn't only have to be manipulation. It could be very, very basic. How about that? That's actually a successful rendition of out of focusing with my fingers pointing to the sky with my iPhone. Took me about 30 shots to get this right. But what I did is I aimed at clouds. I was manipulating my fingers, where they're right over here. I was manipulating my fingers, and it tricked the camera into thinking that something was up close, and it dropped it out of focus. Takes time, I mean, but to me, it's a very interesting image. Something that is, you'll see this everywhere. It's sort of like the oil slick, are reflections. So reflections are natural distortion visuals, because unless you're showing the entire area, you're not able to figure out what it is. Reflections, excuse me, windows, windshields of cars, lakes, puddles, waterways, shiny objects, all have reflective capability. And again, this is the stream outside Bartholomew's Cobble. And I mean, to me, it's an impressionistic image because you really can't define what it is. You sort of think it's water, you know it's water, but it takes some time to realize. Also, one of the nice things about reflections in water is that you're getting to see different depths. So you see the reflection on the water here, but you're also seeing what's below the water right there. And then you got this darkened area there. So it's really, it's a fun thing to do. Any questions at this stage of the game? All right. So let me just go over a couple of different options, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a slide of some different apps as well for the smartphones, and then I'll show you some effects that you could do in camera and in post-production. So there's movement and panning. Movement is capturing something that's moving while you're keeping the camera still. Panning is you're following the item. It's called tracking, and you had that ability, and you could take the photograph. Many of the DSLRs and many smartphones have a tracking function. You got to find it in your menu, and what it does is it literally tracks the item. And if you extend the exposure, the item will be in focus, and the background will be out of focus. Zooming, again, simple. Long exposure, better on a tripod, though you could make it a movement like this. You drag you turn the zoom lens in or out, or a combination of both, and you'll get a really cool effect. Focus is self-explanatory. Dropping something out of focus is really a simple tool. I'm going to show you in camera using the iPhone editing capability. If we have time, I'll show you the post-production capability, how you can distort literally any photograph. Observation is the waves in the water, the oil, the stain, the movement of clouds. Clouds are nice around sunset if you've got a fairly strong upper wind velocity. Using the slow shutter speed, you get this really gorgeous movement. Storms are even better. You got to get willing to be wet, but it's a really cool deal. You saw reflections, right? You saw how you could take a photograph of almost anything that reflects and turn it into something that is really undefinable. Weather is a major tool. Fog is really a beautiful thing to use. Fog and rain. You could photograph rain coming down by setting setting your shutter speed at about 1,000th of a second or 2,000th of a second. By setting your manual focus on about 8 or 10 feet out, what will happen is you will capture the drops as they fall. You can do that with a smartphone by using the other app called Fast Shutter Cam, where you could set your shutter speed up to 5,000 and 6,000, and you'll capture the water falling down or the rain falling down. So here's a series of apps. I'm going to go over each of the apps briefly, and then, like I said, I'm going to do some in-camera editing. Photo Booth comes with most smartphones. It's called Photo Booth on iPhone. I don't know what it's called a smartphone, but basically, Photo Booth allows you to take one picture, make it into 6 different pictures. It automatically changes the picture, makes it into a a funhouse, a mirror, funhouse like the old Coney Island days. It sets up reflections. It sets up kaleidoscopes. It has a variety of functions, and it's a free app. So if you don't have Photo Booth, if you're a Mac user, go to the Apple application store and download it. I think it's under the same name for non iPhones. B612 is an interesting app because it allows you to really dial in a lot of unique techniques. So you could go out and never modify your camera at all and dump B612 on it, and you can take a picture and distort it in dozens of different ways. Night thermal vision is very, very cool. Night thermal vision basically measures heat. So if you were photographing me, for example, my face is the warmest because there's light on it. That would be the reddest. And as it moved away, it'll be turning to yellow, to blues, to greens, and then finally, well, the deep blues, cooler. And again, you can shoot this either in the thermal mode, or you could add a thermal mode afterwards.
Is that like
I shot
infrared?
this. It's slightly different. I'm going to get into infrared in a second.
Okay.
Thermal mode measures temperature, physical temperature, 80, 90, 100 degrees. Infrared measures the nanometers outside of the traditional scope that we see. But I've gone to the zoo with the night thermal vision, and I've done some incredible imagery because you get all these different body movements of temperature. There are non-night thermal visions as well. FLIR, for instance, is one of them. Pro Camera, 645, Halide are all really cool camera modes for the smartphone. Carbon is nice. Carbon allows you to convert color images into a variety of different black and white images. Now, we see black and white as black and white, but in actuality, there are a very, very broad variety of grays. Carbon allows you to do that. 1998 Camry's Vintage allows you to turn modern pictures into scratch-filled sepia tone imagery. So you can load up the system and then you can take a picture. Usually people do it for portraits. You could turn into a sepia tone, which is that brown tone image. You could add scratches. You could add dirt marks. You can make it look like it was taken 150 years ago. PixArt allows you to bring in different type of art and add it to your photographs. So you could add glasses to someone who doesn't have glasses. You could put a wig on someone who doesn't have a wig. It's more of a fun, silly type of tool. Same thing with Glick Art Studio, allows you to manipulate the imagery in a lot of different ways, bringing things in, bringing things out, a variety of changes. Miniatures is cool. Miniatures, if you ever watch the show Sherlock out of the UK, the opening scene is of Eros Square in London, and it looks like they're little toys. Well, miniatures allows you to adjust the area that you're photographing, and everything that is in that area takes on a very, very different, unique smallness. Now, I have a very expensive tilt lens that does that for architectural purposes, but this is a very cool app, and it used to be for free. Photo Editor allows you to edit photographs real simply. Waterlog allows you to turn any of your photographs into watercolors. And then there's a way of actually distorting them to make them into out of focus or ultra sharp watercolors. Mentioned slow shutter. You have slow shutter. You have fast shutter. InLight is a general app that's really cool. It's available. I think it's for free. It offers a combination of a lot of things that are listed. I have it. I don't really use it as much. I once used it a lot. Night vision allows you to use your camera at night. It turns into a spectrum analysis system where it amplifies the light and it makes it into a greenish, bluish type effect. Very, very cool. It's different than night camera, which you have on your smartphone, or night mode on your DSLR. Retro, RTRO, is another app that allows you to make photographs into something that they look older. So if you have a couple of nice out of focus photographs, seeing them in sepia tone is a pretty nice thing to do. And then you might be able to add scratches and such like that. InPixO is a relatively new app for wide a range of in-camera effects. Certainly worthwhile. So infrared cameras, so we see, I think it's 400 to 500 nanometers. Infrared is over here. And traditionally, you would need a a couple of different filters, a red 25A or 96B, I think it is, to see infrared. This simulates it. So what does it do? It turns trees white, it turns sky sometimes very, very dark, it turns people's faces into a variety of different imagery. So these are apps. Again, I tried to select apps that are free. Most of them should be free. If not, they're usually a one-time purchase. So before I go into just some quick in-camera editing, anyone have any questions? All right, so you should be able to see the screens. Can you see my editing screen? Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I take, let me see, if I take, so this is the church in Sheffield, traditional shot. If I press edit, I'm now given a series of different capabilities. Up on top, I could hit filters and I can make that's a fairly blue shot. I can make it bluer. I can make it more dramatic, or I can make it cooler, right? You can see the slight changes. I don't know if you can see them on your screen. They're very visible here. Or I could change it into black and white. So that's filters, and that's up on top over here. If I want to get more dramatic, I could go into the actual controls and drag my controls, which change the image. See, that is that pretty cool. Look at the stint to the sky. And there's sort of white. Sorry?
I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, I'm seeing an interior or something.
What are you seeing? Tell me what you're seeing.
It looks like tables.
Tables, yeah, same thing here.
Tables. Oh, you see the other screen. Hang on one second. Tell me if you see it now.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, okay.
No, we just lost it again.
Yeah, I just got to move something around. Hang on one second. I have two different size screens.
Okay.
So you see that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. So let me go back. So you could drag it using, now you see the dramatic effect you're getting, right?
Yeah.
That's just by changing it here. If you wanted to, you could change different elements of it, exposure, right? Or you could change any of the elements. I could increase the shadows, decrease the shadows. Or if I move down, I could change the intensity of color by increasing saturation. So now look how blue that is, right? I can increase vibrance. Now it's getting a little bit blue-green. And I can change the cast. I can move it into literally any color combination I want. Something like this is a great tool to use when you're doing sunsets or sunrises, because look what happened to the white on the bottom, right? It became an intense yellow. And if I want to, I could just say, I could just revert to original and revert to the original. But then the one that's more unique or most unique is you go to curves. So all digital photographs are made of red, green, and blue, RGB. So I could change this by dragging this up all over. Look at this, right? Just by dragging it around, I can make this picture into anything I want. Or I could do it the other way. I could select a certain color. So I'm going to use the green channel, and I'm only going to move the green channel around. So now everything I was doing before is occurring, but it's really green is being dimensions. So that's a pretty cool effect, right? I mean, I just made this thing purple, right? I could change it around. Or if I decided that I wanted to go back and I wanted to do the blue channel, I could do the same thing. I could just drag it around and I could change it around in the blue channel. So you get all these different effects that you could do just by selecting channels. And I can go back and I could say revert to original, and I'm there. All right, let me just. Then you've got these here where I could actually select a specific color. I could, for example, select yellow. And again, I'm doing the same. I'm subtly adding or taking away yellow. When you start adding these together, you start to get a slightly different impact, a slightly different effect. I don't know how much you're seeing of that, but you should be seeing some type of changes, some light changes. So when you have these with this in camera, this is what you could do on your iPhone or iPad, or literally in your camera when you download it to the Photos app. Or you could do, done here, or if we open up Lightroom, and I'll move it over to the other screen, maybe it's going to come out on that screen. Let's see. So can you see Lightroom right now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a photograph my son Dylan took last night for a couple of his friends, right? So with Lightroom, you have a lot of different unique tools. So for example, you can do the same thing. You could color shift. Or if you wanted to, you could mix colors, which is going to provide you with even greater bizarre capabilities. Or you could create effects that starts to blur things, you see what's happening? Right? I'm able to literally destroy any photograph I want. And this is optic thing that actually allows you to distort it optically. Or I could literally go back and I could change the exposure and all the elements of the exposure. So let's say I like this effect and this is really cool, but I want it darker. Well, I can now make it darker, or I can make it lighter to any degree I want. I could increase contrast, which is the relationship between the lights and the dark. Or I could change the highlights. Now only the bright parts are going to come. So you can see what you can do. You can literally change it in any way, shape, and form you want. Let's pick one more picture. The one thing you can't do is you can't, with this program, take black and white and make it into color. But let's see. There's Dylan. He's taking pictures last night. Let's see. Let's take a shot like this. Again, this is the Sheffield Country store. I could manipulate it. Let's go back here. I can manipulate the exposure, blow it out, darken it out. I could change some of the contrast. I could change some of the highlights. So whatever, if you decided that you did not want to take any photographs and manipulate them when you're taking them, you could literally go into any of these editing programs and take them later on. Always remember that nearly in every editing program, you have the ability, you have a thing called revert. You could revert back to the original. If you have any questions about that, just make a copy of the photograph and it gets stored in your library as well. So,
Any of
yep.
these, can you change the focal length like that one?
So yeah, so let me show you something that you could do. Let me get rid of this here. Let's see. So focal length, you really can't change the focal length. What you can do is you could change the geometry.
Okay.
So there are programs that allow you to change focal length. Let me just shut this thing off here so I don't blind myself. Let's see, here we go here. Let's close this down. So if you go into, this allows you to distort the picture this way, right? This allows you to change the aspect ratio of horizontal to vertical. And then you've got the flips, of course, but then you've got, it's probably, is it here? Maybe not. I had the, oh, here it is, yeah. I had the ability to, where is that? I have the ability to distort. Here we go. I have the ability to distort the file. I'm missing this. Why am I missing it? There is a, yeah, Dwight, there is, oh, optics. Maybe it's under optics. Yeah, the geometry. Here you go. This changes the distortion, and it can, see what it does? It can simulate certain vertical effects, right? Certain optical effects. So you see what I'm able to do? There are some what they call presets that allow you to zoom in and zoom out, but that's about the basics that you could do. So here, let me get to my email and let me show you guys a couple of photographs that you sent me. Okay, so Dwight's done a combo. Let's see. You all see that now, right?
Yeah.
That's combo of motion and being up close, right?
Yep.
Right? Okay.
And then making it really dark.
Yeah. So you got three things going on
That's
there.
the same raffia thing that,
Okay. And then Mike, I'm gonna have to move this in because it's embedded. So Mike created that fire picture, right? Let's see where we are here. Let's see. Let's try to get this. I may have to drag this out and open it up. Let's see. There we go. Okay. There you go. So you can all see this, right? So
Yep.
you see, this is an extended exposure, probably dramatically underexposed.
Yes.
So the lights are the brightest. The light that's on the car looks like a flashlight.
It's an
It's
LED
also bright.
light. Yeah.
LED. Okay. All right. But
Let
you
me
can see
show
the
you.
effect that that's given.
All right, Thad,
Yes.
this is a picture of it. That's a Hot Wheel.
The Hot Wheel. That before was bird. That's a new one.
That's a brand new one. Right,
Okay.
that's a Hot Wheel Corvette on
All right,
fire.
let's see who else. All right. Let me see. Dwight, you sent me the. Dwight, you sent the other one before, which is the. Let's see here. So that's originally Dwight's. So I think I covered everybody who sent me stuff. If I didn't, I haven't received it yet. So we've got a couple of minutes. Anybody have any questions about this whole issue of impressionistic photography? And was it worth spending 90 minutes going over for you?
Yeah, thank you very much.
oh, it certainly was, boy.
So let me say before we end, this was recorded. This is a fabulous wealth of information. I think we may need to look at the recording to sort of assimilate everything. Credible tutorials on Apple apps and all the options, and then the demonstration of the editing was just fabulous.
Good.
So thank you once again.
Okay, you got any questions? Excuse me. Got any questions? Email me or call me. If you look at my website, you'll see I'm the only photographer in the world that doesn't have photographs on my website.
And you have them on Instagram, which is really nice.
Yeah.
If Ken and Mike have not been to the Sandisfield Art Center, this is provided to you by the Sandisfield Art Center and THAD. And so we do have let me just share what's coming up, because I think this will be of interest. We have a sculpture show outdoors, July 3rd, 20 local sculptors, some fabulous stuff. You probably have read about it in the local press. And then, as I mentioned, Michelle Arnaud's crossword puzzle workshop. And Thad, we hope to bring you into the Art Center when we're open, either this year or next, because it's great to have you in the room with people as well.
Love to.
Thank you. This was just fantastic.
Okay, so if you watch this, you'll see there's my contact information. Love to give advice, so just give me a call. But thank you all for attending. Have a very, very wonderful rest of your Saturday.
Wonderful. See you Friday, Thad. Thanks.
Yep, see you Friday, Dwight. Thank you.
Thank you.